Hello, and welcome to the Beautiful Business Podcast, where today I'm excited to be joined by the eminent psychologist and award-winning author, Jess Baker. Jess works with a wide range of organisations and individuals, helping people become the best versions of themselves. It was through this work that Jess noticed what she came to term super helper syndrome, where people who love to help others do so to such an extent that they overlook their own needs and help others to the detriment of their own well-being. Today, Jess joins me to discuss super helper syndrome and how it manifests in the workplace. Maybe you'll recognise some of the super helper traits in yourself, or maybe in others around you. We'll touch on whether empathy, a key trait of super helpers, might even have a genetic link, why super helpers may unintentionally not be as helpful as they intend. Plus, for leaders and business owners listening, Jess offers insight into how we can harness the strengths of super helpers in a way that benefits both the individual and the organisation.
I'm not going to tell anyone what they should and shouldn't do when it comes to their helping habits. What I do suggest, however, is to put in boundaries that protect your own needs, your own time, your own energy, your own capacity. And choosing those boundaries, I call them conscious boundaries because they are. You have to think consciously about them.
Welcome to the Beautiful Business Podcast from the Wow Company. If you're searching for the right strategies, tools, and connections to ignite your thinking and elevate your business, then join us for a fortnightly dose of inspiration. Our guests range from industry-leading agencies and cutting-edge tech pioneers to motivational speakers and executives, all offering actionable insights to help you thrive in profit and purpose. So, whether you're a growing consultancy or an agency leader, this podcast is your source of knowledge and encouragement to spark meaningful change in your business and beyond.
Welcome, Jess. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
First up, a question we ask all of our guests is, tell us something about you that we don't already know or won't find out on LinkedIn.
I always go back, about 20-something years to when I volunteered with the Orangutan Foundation International and spent 6 very long weeks in the jungle at Camp Leakey. It was incredible.
Wow, whereabouts is it?
It's Kalimantan, which is on the island of Borneo. It's the Indonesian half, the kind of southeast area of Borneo. Yeah. And I missed my graduation because I just really wanted to be there.
6 very long weeks. Was it a tough?
It was amazing and beautiful and character building. I think if you'd had Big Brother back in those days, it would have been huge fun to have filmed us all because the human dynamics, was so interesting. We'd all come from far corners of the world, with one thing in common. And I've kept in touch with a few of the people actually from that group. It was lovely, but it was fascinating experience, and I just have some kind of affinity with orangutans for some reason.
Yeah. Oh, super cute. Well, thanks for sharing. I also read somewhere that you wanted to be a psychologist since you were 12. What was it that led you to want to be a psychologist at such a young age?
There's a longer story, but the short story is I found out about kind of talking therapies at around age 11, at age 12. And I think from then on, and I'd always wanted to work with children. So I thought, that's how I could work with kids. I could work with children with emotional and behavioral difficulties, of which I kind of was one. So it felt like already I had that sense of, I want to help people like I feel how I feel.
Has it been everything you hoped it would be, everything you imagined it would be?
Yes, it really has been. But I think there was this time, so I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. I moved into the NHS as soon as I could. I did I was building up to do the clinical training doctorate and building up a number of placements, kind of experience through different placements. And I happened to just fall into, although I really wanted to work with children, I happened to fall into dementia care. And so for the first few years, I was working with older adults with dementia. I was supporting their families going through it. I was working in a community hospital in Oxford. And then I ended up working on a fascinating project, which kind of was a real breakthrough, really, actually, called dementia care mapping. And I was sitting in nursing homes and recording activity without intervening. You couldn't intervene, but recording activity, the quality of care um, between from the staff to the residents. And that was called dementia care mapping. Um, and I think it was shortly after that I realized I was taking my work home with me. I was highly stressed. I was really deeply emotionally affected by everything that I'd seen, especially in this research role where I couldn't intervene. And I'm the kind of person I want to help. I want to jump forward. I have a natural inclination, which is why I wrote the book, I have that compulsive helper in me. And it was extremely frustrating. Um, and so for lots of different reasons, I realized actually clinical psychology isn't the way for me, but business psychology was the next kind of plan B, if you like. But I also thought that was a bit of a sellout, like, oh, but business is really not for me. I don't think I would seek business. Working in industry and being commercial isn't my natural default. So that was also an interesting challenge. But within a few weeks, once I decided that business psychology was for me, I happened to fall into a funded master's in Birmingham at Aston Business School with the most amazing team and with Professor Mike West, who interestingly now our work is kind of coming back round, and I'm very much in the compassionate leadership space as well. So yeah, that was just a fascinating kind of unexpected realignment, I think, of how a psychologist can be. You don't have to work in the healthcare service, and now I've been working as a management consultant, and I've been self-employed now for 12 years more.
And you can deploy those skills in a different context, right?
In the workplace, absolutely. So it's all really focused.
So we're here to talk about the super helper syndrome. You have quite literally co-authored the book on the subject. For our listeners who haven't yet read the book, can you explain a bit more about what super helper syndrome is?
It is the compulsion to help others, which is fundamentally a lovely thing. But when that's coupled with not looking after your own needs, that's when you experience this syndrome bit. And, I'm not using syndrome as a medical term. I'm using the other definition of the word syndrome, which is a collection of behaviors and emotions. And it's really when you help to the detriment of your own well-being. And I think most of us know somebody who does that, or most of us have experienced something similar ourselves at some point in our lives.
Yeah. So what would the beliefs be that underpin a super helper?
Well, there are 3 that drive the compulsion to help. And I'll talk about those first. So we've got the good person belief, which is I must help others to prove I'm a good person. We've got the help everyone belief, which is I should help everyone. Notice the musts and the shoulds here, and I can talk about that in a minute. And then this third one kind of came out of a gap in the research that, I co-wrote the book with my partner. And it's based on all of my experience from seeing people help to the detriment of their own well-being all the way through my early experience in the NHS, in fact, my early childhood. I was practically brought up by my childminder, who was indeed herself a super helper, and I dedicated the book to her. But this third one came about because there's also a type of person who find themselves maybe at work, with a project or with a team or with a client group. You think, I'm indispensable. They couldn't survive without me. And again through the research, like we did so many interviews with, more than 50. And I really could have done more. It was fascinating speaking to people all over the world who've experienced, the compulsion to help. And it was really strong. And we just basically called it, they couldn't survive without me belief. Fundamentally, you think that about your patients or your team or your project, like this can't, we've all had that moment, haven't we? And we love to think of ourselves as indispensable. Like although I'm sure we wouldn't wear a t-shirt saying that, but we're like, oh, actually, I have these gifts or I have these skills. And also the kind of quiet desperation to want to contribute and feeling responsible. And that also, this last one, that they couldn't survive without me belief, speaks to a lot of the carers I've spoken to. So I've done a lot of webinars for Carers UK and the AFBPsS and other national charities. And they really get that aspect. So it's not that they were kind of grew up as highly empathic, but they found themselves in a setting where they felt they needed to be the person to drive this through, just to see this through.
If you're a carer or even a parent, surely there is a thing there that quite literally someone couldn't survive without me.
Yeah. So there's also that practical element, of course. This child can't survive without me. My puppy, she's 8 months. She couldn't survive without me or my partner in the house. But I think if we bring it back to the context of the irrational belief, and when we think about that, so yes, if you acknowledge that there's a practical element here, but if you only have, if you put it back in the workplace, and I'll give you an example that we use in the book. A dentist recalled a time where she had been physically suffering for days on end, even to the extent that her patients were saying, like, should you really be at work? And she's like, yeah, I'm fine. And she thought to herself, actually, Saturday morning, I'm going to go into the hospital. I've got a list of emergency children to see. There's, dental surgery. Loads of them have been waiting on the waiting list for months. I can't possibly let them down. I'll pop into A&E after I've done the 4 hours of surgery. What happens? She gets to the hospital. She crashes through the front doors. She collapses. She's in hospital for 3 months. And in the interview, she says, Jess, I felt like such an idiot. I thought I was the only one who could have done those surgery. Of course, there were other dentists they could have called upon. She said, even in that interview, she said, I don't even remember driving to the hospital. My brother found the car parked a couple of days later, kind of skew whiffed on the pavement. Because she was in such a bad state, Paul, this happens. And it's that sense of actually, when it's an irrational belief, that's what we're interested in. That's what's driving the compulsion to help. So, and then the fourth belief, this is also really important because a lot of people will hold this belief potentially without even having the compulsion to help. So, which is why super helper syndrome stands out on its own, really. But the no needs belief is the fourth belief. And that's when you say, I shouldn't have any needs. I don't deserve to have my own needs met.
Wow, you're basically subjugating your own needs to the people you're helping or want to help.
Absolutely. You're prioritizing others ahead of yourself. And because you're not taking the time to replenish or re-energize or reset, you're going to drive yourself to, the 4 of the outcomes of super helper syndrome. There's exhaustion. That's the first and most obvious one. And we've seen it in everyone from ICU nurses during COVID through to, your frazzled parent, just giving and giving and giving and not stopping to take a moment for themselves. And when they do, they feel guilty. So there's this whole other aspect to the super helper syndrome, which a lot of people say that that really speaks to them as well.
Are there any commonalities with where these beliefs or traits come from?
So there are a number of different impacts, as you can imagine. Childhood experiences are, as we know, I'm not just a psychologist, but, everybody knows the importance of childhood experiences and how that shapes us, how that conditions how we see ourselves and how we see our place in the world. And I think the thread here is that, often people, if they have the kind of childhood experiences, then they are likely to be, they were the good girl or the good boy. They were praised and valued for helping others. Maybe they're the old, I've had lots of people from different, they'll say, oh, this is like, because I'm the oldest child, I did this. And the others will say, well, because I'm the middle child, I did this. And they'll say, oh, because I was the youngest, everything was left to me. So, wherever you are in that linear process, it's your experience. So I often will invite people to reflect on what childhood experiences has shaped their compulsive helping. What messages did they have? Were they praised? Were they told off when they weren't helping? Maybe they just had role models. I think for me, it was a blend of childhood messages. So I felt loved and appreciated when I was helping. But I also had a childminder from the age of 4 who I called my Auntie Jean. She was a role model. I had other people in my life who were just really good and helpful souls, very supportive. And I, even from a young age, as we've already discussed, I wanted to be like them. I felt that there was value in that. But then if you look at the broader context, a lot of South Asian people I speak to say, well, it's part of my culture. Or I speak to, there's friends I have from Ghana or Nigeria, and they're like, oh, it was part of my culture as well, especially being the woman in the family. People come to rely on me. So there's lots of different ways in which we can form our own self-image as a helpful person, and lots of ways that can come about. And once it is part of your self-image, I think this is one of the keys, really, Paul. If you see yourself and if you value yourself as a helpful person now, because others have, then that drives more helping behaviors.
Oh, so
That
it then
propels
compounds
us
in. Yeah, yeah,
forward.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, well, I see myself, if you see somebody's trip in the street, well, I see myself as a helpful person. I should go over and help them, But actually that person just got up and brushed themselves off and felt more embarrassed.
Yeah, because that's
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
self-image.
So there's also a really positive side to helping. I'm not ever going to say to anyone, stop helping. I'm just going to say, look after yourself as well as you're looking after others. And there's the neurochemical reward system. So our brains reward us for helping others. And there are a number of different things that might happen when those activated systems kind of start pinging. I am always imagine my brain like a pinball machine. It kind of bing, 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 and the lights light up. And what we've got is even lots of research that shows us this. Not only do we enjoy that kind of physical warm glow, have you ever experienced that kind of euphoric
Yeah,
high?
yeah, yeah.
One of the researchers that I read on, he called it the helper's high, and I think that's a really lovely warm glow that you want to experience again and again. But even so, helping others can decrease our own cortisol levels, our own stress levels, and anxiety. On the other hand, it can also encourage us to help more. It can boost our energy, and it can even build hope and courage for the future. But get this, okay, one of the studies that I remember reading was about a longitudinal study focused on older adults who had taken up volunteering in later life. And they wrote down their life expectancy, or I might live another 5 years or 8 years, whatever. And the research shows that the majority of people who take up volunteering, no matter when in life really, it can actually elongate your life. It can help you live for longer. So there's this whole beautiful scientific background and understanding as to why we help and the benefits of helping too. Although I can, the super helper syndrome sounds like something that's disastrous, and it is pretty awful. Helping has its benefits too.
Highs as well. Yeah. So after I first came across your book, there's a friend of mine who will undoubtedly listen to the podcast, and I went and spoke to her and I said, "Look, I've just read this book. It's written about you." So what was good about the book was it was a really good way to have a conversation with her. So a lot of the traits you described, like subjugating her own needs, like wanting to be a good person, it's really difficult to kind of criticize someone and say, well, do you know what? Maybe you don't need to be such a good person, be a bit less of a good person. I was really grateful for your book. It has opened up a really interesting conversation. And like you say, some of these beliefs and behaviors are deeply ingrained, aren't they? So it's not like I don't think anyone's just going to necessarily read the book and be fixed. There's work to do. But like a couple of questions I had were, you talked a lot about the care profession. I would imagine that people that are programmed to help, that enjoy the helper's high, are they naturally drawn into certain professions, would you say?
Well, I think they probably are. I think to the great extent, yes. I mean, a lot of the interviewees I spoke to were in health and social care for that reason, because they feel compelled to help. Like, I wanted to be a psychologist. There are, my partner's brothers are all psychiatric nurse, a psychologist, a teacher, and a social worker. They had a real role model in their mum and their father, wanting to help. So I think we can definitely be drawn to helping professions. And what's really interesting is, and I'm really glad you've raised this, because they don't have to be just in health and social care. I think almost every job is about helping. And we pull that out in the beginning of the book. If you're stacking shelves in a supermarket and you reach for something higher up than the woman next to you can reach, then you've just helped her. if you've given somebody, if you're standing on the tarmac apron at an airport, waving your little batons in the air, you're helping. It's a fascinating way to think about it. And honestly, when Rod and I both sat down to write the book, we looked at everything that had ever been written and published on helping in that context. And there's very little, in fact. And even when we found a book called Helping by Professor Shine, it's all mostly about his experience of helping as a consultant. And so we were kind of really laying it all out on the table and saying, actually, if you look at, I give an example of the book of when I just walk up to the bakery, but I happen to speak to a neighbor or, say, and she says, oh, well, yeah, the barbecue is going ahead this week. And then the car in front of me stops to let me cross the street. So there's lots of different ways in which we help. And I think in the workplace, whichever industry you're in, if you are solving a problem, if you are, delivering a product or a service that makes something easier or better for somebody else, then there's a chance that you're helping. And even if you're helping a colleague, you're supporting that person. You're doing something for them. You're offering your expert help. You might be in IT, just internally in IT, and saying, well, okay, I'm answering the phone every day and helping people reboot their computer.
So, and I guess like we're here to talk about beautiful businesses, which are by definition people centered, and maybe like definitely see what you're saying across a whole broad of professions. There's people helping, but what's the difference? Certainly in the business context, what's the difference between helping, because we'd all want people in our organizations to be helpful and helping, someone who's helpful, really helpful, and someone who is a super helper and possibly suffering some of like the negative consequences of being a super helper.
And I've thought long and hard about this. And I'm actually developing an online quiz at the moment because I think it's really important for people to be able to identify them and other people that they work with. So I want to kind of give a quite in-depth answer, if that's okay, Paul, because I think there are lots of different ways in which the super helper, which we've never defined before, and we will never define a super helper because there are so many types. It could be the fixer in the family, it could be the go-to person, it could be the mediator, peacekeeper, it could be the doer, the rescuer. There are so many different ways in which we can help. But I think in the workplace, it's always tipping into the where there are signs of they're not looking after themselves, or they're not behaving in a way that is conducive to them or their career or their personal growth. So, for example, you might be going above and beyond to support your colleagues. You might be the first to volunteer for responsibilities. You might see yourself as an indispensable team member, of course. But when you struggle to say no, you will find yourself overworking. You might be taken for granted. This builds the resentment. You might not ever say anything, but you're hoping that people might spot the fact that you might be a bit grumpy. But if you carry on that particular path of taking on more and more and more, ultimately, because we're trying to prove our self-worth, because we're trying to, we're fulfilling our self-fulfilling prophecy of I am a good person, I am a helpful person, then what can tend to happen is that they're taking on more, but they aren't really doing so in a focused way. They're not doing so in a way that thinks like, okay, well, how can I improve my career opportunities? Or how can I help the right people? Okay, I'm spending all this time helping my colleagues, but they don't really need me to finish their PowerPoint for them. I could be doing something more impactful in my own way based on my own strengths. So I often ask people to kind of realign their thinking when it comes to what they're contributing and why, and try to make conscious choices about that. I'd like to talk about boundaries a bit later on, if you can remind me, because I'll forget.
No. Let's do that. Can I just jump in and ask a question there, because there's something that you've like briefly touched on there, which is this idea that someone who thinks that they're really helpful might not actually be doing the most helpful thing that they could be doing as well. And I see that sometimes, and again, to go back to the point about trying to tell someone not to be quite so helpful feels counterintuitive, doesn't it? But
compulsive, I think.
from
Yeah.
Yeah, from what I understood from what you're saying, um, ho how you've explained this, the like, as an individual, this compulsive need to help, you might not actually be able to stop yourself, and it does need an intervention from outside. So as a, like, colleague or manager or leader noticing this behavior, what advice would you give people in that situation?
I think it comes down to whether the help is wanted or needed. And we cover this in the book as well. So I think help works and goes well when it's wanted and needed, when you are offering the right kind of help to the right person at the right time. What is often missing is clarity. We often make assumptions about what is needed and how much help is needed. And in this particular way, well, I default to helping, let's say, in a really supportive way, or I default to helping in a kind of hands on, I'll just do it kind of way. You're likely then to be caught in a trap of not taking the time to say, hang on a second, can this person do it for themselves? Does this person need that much of my help? Maybe I can just help by listening to their problems. Maybe I can help by guiding them or directing them to somebody else that can help them in a better way. So taking the time to ask questions, and in fact, we wrote a whole list of questions in the book because that's what we see again and again and again. And I've been in management consulting. Rod ran his own consulting business for 25 years, and especially with in hospitality, drawing on his experience, it was often people jumping in to help, assuming that they know what is needed and that this is the right time and that this is the right form of help. So perhaps inviting people to say, can we just reflect on your helping behaviors? It's great that you've got the energy. It's great that you've got the commitment and the responsibility and you really want to see this through. But there are different ways of helping. And it doesn't necessarily always include you having to jump in 100% into the deep end. And the book pulls that out. The first part of the book talks about helping in this very simple, honest way. And I think that's what's been really useful to some of the people who I know who are in business who've read the book, saying, I've never explored it like this before. Because often and you've seen it, Paul, I'm sure, when you see, it's almost speaking to the example you're giving, when you're helping too much, not only do you often maintain that person's position. So if you're over helping one person, they're never going to learn for themselves. They're always going to be, you're kind of maintaining the status quo. They're never going to be able to develop. They're never going to be able to make their own mistakes and learn from experience. But there's also another thing at play here, and that is the dynamic of where you're continuing to make the same mistake yourself as a compulsive helper. You're not realizing the impact. And I remember even on Twitter, X now, when there was a super helper syndrome thread, and even on X, I think he was a consultant medic, and he came on saying, yeah, it's really annoying taking on, doing a shift after one of my super helper colleagues, because the patients expect more from me. They ask me more questions. They expect more time from me, and it's blooming annoying. And I was thought, wow, that is a whole other aspect that person who's over helping and, or just spending more time with that patient or doing whatever they're doing in this kind of super helper way actually has a detrimental impact on her colleagues later on in the day.
Yeah, maybe in consultancies you've seen it, but definitely in professional services firms, I've seen exactly the same thing that you pick up from a colleague who's over delivered, and the client's expectations are altered as a result. So I can definitely see it from the medic's perspective
Yeah,
as well.
I've got examples from geologists working in gas and oil. I've got examples of estate agents, as well as accountants as well. Professional services too, lawyers. I mean, there are so many examples in the book that we use because they're people's real experience. But again, they're always over giving, and you're thinking, okay, who's losing out? Potentially losing out in the business,
And
in the
there's a story
organisation.
that I heard you talk about a nurse who was off duty. She was coming out to the gym. Have I got the story right? And she went into the car park and she helped someone who was who she thought was struggling to get out of the car, get out of the car.
And so, I mean, this is, beautiful, amazing nurse. I was on the phone or Zoom together for about an hour or so. And at the very end, I said, "Was there anything else you wanted to tell me?" She's like, "Oh, actually, I've just got this memory. Something happened. I'm really embarrassed. So I probably haven't told anyone about it." So, "Oh, yeah, definitely tell me." Um, and she said, "Yeah, I was parking at this car park at the gym. I had my gym buddy with me. And, I just kind of got out of the car and I noticed someone parked in the disabled car parking bay across the car park. And I ran over and I saw that this person was at their door. The car door was open and they were at the door. And kind of between the door and the seat." She said, "I ran over and I said, 'It's okay, I'm a nurse. I can use my manual handling skills.'" And she kind of didn't explain it quite like that, but she said, "I can help, trust me." And so she kind of levered this person out of the car, or kind of away from the door, and helped her stand up straight. And she had a walking aid and she got the walking aid and she said, "Oh, is that okay?" And then the person said, "Actually, I was trying to get in." And it was just such a misunderstanding, this assumption that this person was trying to get out of the car. And so this nurse I was interviewing was beside herself with embarrassment, and she felt so humiliated. But that's just a pure example of, make sure the help is wanted and needed, and what kind of help.
Wanted and
Instead of
needed,
taking the
yeah.
time to say, "Hey, would you like some help? Okay, what would you like me to help with? How could I help you now?" She just jumped straight in. And there are so many examples like that in the book of compulsion. That compulsion takes over. And I've done that. I've humiliated myself in the past. And she said no harm done. The woman actually found it quite funny. And then obviously she helped her get into the car. She didn't just leave her standing.
But I just thought that was a really great story about how, like, kind of like the flip side of, and like exactly like you said about, is the help wanted, is the help needed.
Some other facets of super helping in the workplace are less obvious than the kind of classic jumping in and to help and to saying yes to everything. There's also what I call the invisible supporter profile, and they seem to be the kind of backbone of the work, and they will be quietly beavering away. They won't tell you how many hours they're working on a project. They won't tell you that they're doing it at night, or maybe at weekends. They won't tell you how much they've suffered. They won't acknowledge that maybe themselves. They won't be the ones getting the credit for the job either. And I think, as a leader, working with those people, encouraging them to take roles that are, slightly more at the forefront, or giving them an opportunity to speak in meetings or presentations, and making sure that because they are capable, they're very capable, but giving them opportunities if they want to be more visible and get the credit that they deserve. Because I so many coaching clients come to me saying, "Oh, my boss," I'll always start a consultation with a client before engaging them officially. And I'll ask things like, "Well, you've said that your boss thinks you're good enough for the job, but you don't seem to have the confidence to take the promotion or even apply for it." Um, and it's often they're often high achievers as well. They often are people who are capable. And so often, I think, as a leader, we can then say, "Well, who is it?" Yes, it's very easy to see the people who are always putting their fingers or their heads above the parapet, or putting their hands up in meeting, or leaning in, or speaking up, and doing all those things that we should be doing. But what about the people who are the backbone of this? Are they being overlooked for the promotion? Are they being overlooked for responsibility on a different project? Can you lean on them? They are completely committed. They are also engaged. But they might not be feeling as valued because they're being overlooked, because they are quieter. So that's a different way of seeing the super helper in the workplace as well.
And I guess with people working increasingly remotely, it's even easier for someone to be invisible, or for
Mm,
someone's contribution at least not to be seen. Uh, and like, I wonder if there's also like stereotypes about people who are kind and helpful, not being like your stereotypical leaders. Like, some people have like an image of what it means to be a leader, ambitious and thrusting and driving, and actually, um,
mm,
like, I wonder how we can better, as organizations, harness those strengths, obviously without leading to
yeah.
exhaustion and burnout. What advice would you have for
Yeah.
leaders to harness not just the invisible helpers, but helpers and a load of those traits that come with
Mm.
it in general?
I'm on a mission at the moment, so I'm glad to be asked. Having read a lot around compassionate leadership and what it means to be a compassionate leadership ourselves, I think there's another aspect that's missing from the research at the moment, and that is that we don't value a lot of this. So a lot of people will say, "Oh, my kindness is being seen as my weakness. I smile too much at work," or they don't think I've got. Coaching clients say this to me. I don't have much gravitas at work. I've got 20+ years experience, and I'm in a fairly senior role, but I'm never going to make it to C-suite because I'm nice, and they see me as nice. And one client even said very recently, she did get everyone to do a little a really good actually personality profiling tool. And it just helps break the ice, and it helps me see how they see themselves, if nothing else. And she came out as the helper, which is a type 2 on this profile. And she's like, "Oh," and the look of disgust on her face was shocking to me. She's like, "Are you serious? Am I still a helper, rescuer type? I thought I'd grown out of that." And I was so shocked. I was like, "Wow, you don't see your value. You have the strengths. You have these qualities." And I had to explain, and I will prepare to explain this to everybody in the world. You have the ability to go into a room, to read that room, to sense how people are feeling. You will know, will you be able to read that room better than most people? You'll be able to make people feel warm, welcomed, listened to, included. You'll know how to play it, You'll know how to attend to people. You'll know if something's not quite right with another colleague that you only ever see once every 3 weeks because you still work from home. But you'll still know that something isn't right. You'll be picking up on that. Your empathic abilities, your coupled with your desire to help. So empathy is that I feel your pain, or I see your pain, I feel it. And compassion is separate to that, is I want to alleviate it. So empathy says, I feel your pain. Compassion says, I want to alleviate it. And so with a desire to want to help, that is spectacular. We don't have enough of that, Paul. We don't have enough balanced, helpers, empathic people. I don't want to spend my life, and I do a lot of work with corporates. I do a lot of work with, I a guest lecturer at the University of Cambridge on this as well, on leadership. But I sit there and I'm training people on a webinar, for example, about compassionate leadership, and I'm getting nothing back. They're like, "Yeah, well, I don't really, I hit my sales targets, Jess. Why do I need this?" Okay, what I really prefer to do is what I've been doing for the last 20 years is helping people who are already empathic. They just don't have the leadership's positions at the moment. They're lacking that self-belief. They're lacking that self-worth.
As leaders, what can we do to create an environment where these, like from a business or business owner's perspective, kind of feel ridiculous that you would have tried and harness these traits, these people, these abilities, but clearly it's not happening enough. What as leaders, what can we do within our businesses to better harness those personality types or skills?
I think it starts with our thinking. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a psychologist, but I actually fundamentally believe this. If we think or make assumptions about somebody who smiles, who is pleasant, who is nice, who does things, who maybe they bring. One of the things I told a coaching client not to do was, I told her not to bake anymore for the team, because unfortunately in her very masculine hierarchical organization, baking was seen as something that as a kind of low status offering. And she was heartbroken about that. And I said, "I know, I'm not trying to change you, but just try it. Just don't do it for a few months and see how things change." And they did. It was really unfortunate. Really unfortunate. She's like, "When can I start baking again?" I'm like, "As soon as you're in a leadership position. Get that role first, and then you can start baking for everyone again." But it was hindering the way that people saw her. So, to be aware of this, and I don't ever say to a coaching client, you should change. I only ever say, I talk in dials, like a volume dial. Dial your empathy up or down, different, and know how to do that. Well, different characteristics can act as strengths, but you don't want them to go into overdrive, but you also don't want to underplay them. And as leaders, we need to be able to, I think, firstly, stop assuming that just because someone is nice and smiley and or quiet and helpful in the background, that they're happy doing that. How can we have that conversation to say, look, I've noticed you do all of these things. And, did you want to go for that promotion? Because I can support you. I can, we can talk about how you can have more responsibility or how you can be more visible. Whatever it takes, I will support you because our organization needs more people like you with these qualities. Or is it that you as a leader can say, actually, we're starting a coaching and mentoring practice. Would you like to be a mentor for somebody else in the organization? There are lots of different ways in which you can play out, in which you can support the helper at work. And I think, basic asking questions. How do you want more support? I want to support you. I want this organization to support you. I don't want you to feel undervalued and overlooked. I want you to feel motivated and engaged and happy to be here. What can we do for you to support you better?
If someone's listening to a podcast today and they think, oh, do you know what? I recognize these traits. I have these beliefs. I think I might be a super helper. Obviously, they should go and buy the book, read the book, and buy a copy for all of their friends. What other advice would you give? What kind of like practical steps could someone take if they resonate with the conversation we've had today and think, look, do you know what? I get it. This is me.
Take a moment to reflect on your helping behaviors, when it's gone into overdrive, when it's gone into that, when you've noticed it's gone from helping out of compassion to helping out of compulsion. To what extent are you trying to fulfill the self-image of, a helper, the best helper you can possibly be? Because that's the first step in trying to detach your self-worth from your helping behaviors. You're already a good person. You are amazing. And you've got so much to give. It doesn't mean you need to give it all of the time to all of the people in all of the ways. One of the things that we talk about in the book is very clear on how to set boundaries. So I wanted to come back to this. I'm really glad I remembered it. The choice is yours. And I would say to anyone reading the book, and I say to them in the book as well, like, you can carry on helping in exactly the same way as you always have done. That's for you to decide. But at least now you have made a conscious choice to do so. And if it's still at the detriment of your own well-being, then that's for you to decide. I'm not going to tell anyone what they should and shouldn't do when it comes to their helping habits. What I do suggest, however, is to put in boundaries that protect your own needs, your own time, your own energy, your own capacity. And choosing those boundaries, I call them conscious boundaries because they are. You have to think consciously about them and think about who you're helping, how you're helping, and when you're helping. So you can consciously choose, who am I helping at the moment? Well, actually, I'm helping everyone. I've got a list of 20 friends. Maybe some of them aren't even friends, but they're just relying on me. Quote unquote, a woman in the book who's a clinical psychologist, she said, they have me on speed dial. It's like I'm their kind of therapist in their pocket. She doesn't, she's like, I pick up the phone. I don't want to, but I pick up the phone because I feel I should. But I know I'm going to be on the phone for like an hour or more. It's a Sunday and I want a day off. So think about who you're helping. And it might be that you say, well, I'll help less, I'll let go of that extra volunteering job because I'm already helping in my role and I'm already supporting a family member who really needs me right now. So I am pretty much at capacity. So I'll just, dial it down a little bit. Choosing when you're helping. Well, my mother used to phone me five times a day and expect an hour chat, And so I'd have to say, these are the boundaries, Mum. I'd happily give you an hour on Sunday, but right now I'm at work. So let's chat on Sunday, and I can give you a whole hour and I can give you all of my attention then. And lo and behold, didn't normally need to take that long even. But, choosing when you're helping to give yourself the time and the space to replenish and re-energize yourself. And then thinking about how you're helping, which we've already talked about a little bit. In what ways? Maybe instead of being on the phone for hours and hours and hours, just say, do you know, I've only got 15 minutes right now, but if you want more time, let's talk again on Wednesday. We can have part 2 on Wednesday. And if you need more time next week, then let's talk again then. Because sometimes what we find ourselves doing when we're not putting these boundaries in place, we're also maintaining their behavior. We're also, especially when it comes to supportive phone calls like that, when you just go, yeah, which is something that my partner has called out. We're really good at spotting other people in the super helper role, but they aren't necessarily good at spotting themselves. They're like, oh, no, I don't need that. No. So be that person, be the person to say, look, I mean this with love and I'm sharing it with you because I think it might be useful if nothing else. It might help you help other people better. and that in that way they'll think, oh, okay, well, I'll read the book then if it means that I can help people better. But I think there are times when my partner has been my guide on when my boundaries are being breached. He'll say, Jess, will you talk to that person on the phone for that last hour? Like, yeah. Did you tell them about the thing you're going through at the moment? Did they tell you about the stress that you're experiencing? No, I didn't really, but that's okay. It's about them. Now, there are some people who are in my life who I don't need anything from. And I am absolutely 100% happy to be the go-to supportive person. And that's my boundary. But I've chosen that. There are some people who I've let go because I was tired and felt resentful of the imbalance in the relationship. You have to you have to look after yourself, and there are lots of different ways in which you can do that.
Who, when, and how?
Choosing your conscious boundaries.
That's really fascinating. Any other advice? Anything else we've not covered so far?
Yeah, I think that, it all comes down to self-worth. And if you hold any of the compulsive beliefs, the irrational beliefs, I must help others, I should help everyone. They couldn't survive without me. I don't deserve to have my needs met. And while I'm on there, let me just give you the positive, healthier versions of those July, because they're also quite nice. They're kind of little affirmations as well. My self-worth is not dependent on helping others. I know and respect the limits of my capacity to help. I know and respect the limits of my responsibility to help. And I deserve to have my own needs met. And I think those are really powerful. And I've experienced all of this, by the way, Paul. You and I have chatted before, so you know that already. But just for your listeners, I've experienced every single one of these and still have to keep them in check. It's still a job for me to keep them in check and go, okay, well, I know and respect the limits of my capacity to help, but I still really want to. Okay, great, let's do it. Okay, and I know it's going to tire me out for the next couple of weeks. Fine, I will rest after. It's really about making those conscious decisions. And then I think, ultimately it does come down to beyond boundaries and making sure that you've got support, you're asking for help. One of the things that people are, particularly super helpers are rubbish at is asking for help. And please ask for help before you really, really need it. All of my coaching clients come to me at the end of their tether, and I'd be thinking, if only you came 3 months ago, we wouldn't have had to do so much work. If only you came to me sooner, it would be much easier to get you through this process. You wouldn't have reached burnout. You wouldn't be exhausted. You wouldn't be on sick leave.
I thought the positive affirmations are absolutely gold. I'm going to listen to the podcast myself, write those down. I think that's incredibly useful. But in that thing about I wish you'd come to me 3 months before is really hard, isn't it? Because I can definitely relate to that myself. And I think, well, I can do more. I've got a holiday coming up, or I've got some time off. I'll keep going. I'll push on through. But what are those markers to say, well, look, I'm at 80%. I should probably stop and talk to someone at this point?
And I think the markers are noticing that what beliefs are holding you in that compulsion to help. And is it the fact that you're still trying to prove yourself to somebody that you're worth it, that you're a good person, that you deserve love, that you deserve to feel valued? Offer that to yourself. And that's the third prong, I would say. I always come back to self-compassion. Be really kind to yourself. What if you were talking to Paul, on the phone, and you were, saying, I'm at 80% capacity, I could give a little bit more. What would you say to yourself? But you don't really have to. You don't really need to reach burnout right now. Somebody else can step up. You can delegate to somebody else. You can redirect that person for a different source of help. What else can you do that would still be helpful, but not require so much from you?
That's brilliant. I've absolutely loved chatting to you. I'm conscious that we're almost out of time. I promise I could sit and listen to you all day. This is just absolute gold. So thank you for giving me your time. Just before we finish, I've got a few follow-up questions. But firstly, what's next for you? Where are you taking the Super Helper Syndrome next, or what's the next project you're working on?
So the Super Helper Syndrome is available in hardback, paperback, and ebook. It's also in Turkish, Japanese, Chinese, and coming out in Polish next year. You're the first to hear about that, so it's really exciting. So it's still out there and having its beautiful place in the world, which I'm really grateful for. I'm I run webinars for corporates and for health and social care trusts up and down the country, and on how to be a healthier helper. So that's ongoing work for me. It's work I love. Sometimes I'm a keynote speaker, and sometimes I'm just kind of dropped in to do a well-being program as part of their annual well-being program or something. But personally, I'm continuing to do it. Private coaching. I do really love working with people who are high achievers or want to be high achievers, but they know they're getting in their own way, or they know that others and their desire to help others is getting in their own way. And the quiz will be released in the next couple of weeks, so hopefully by the time this goes live, I'll be able to put the link in the show notes. It's just really important. I've got loads of it's quite an in-depth report you get at the back of that, and so I'd love for people to try that out. And I'm also going to be launching the group coaching program for empathic people who want to lead with heart, and that's to kind of elevate their empathy, to amplify their impact, to really take those cohort and say, you have such beautiful strengths and qualities that are completely overlooked or just downplayed right now. How do we work together to make sure you can be giving all of that good stuff in a way that the organisation, the team, the patients, the clients, and you are benefiting from it? And how can we make sure that you get into a leadership role or a more a role with more responsibility, perhaps, or more visible role where other people can see you do that. You can work your magic. And that's building on a lot of the work I've done with my coaching clients.
If anyone wants to find more information on that, I presume it would be on your website, will it?
Yes, that's right. jessbaker.co.uk, and everything is there.
So two final questions that we ask everyone. One, what does beautiful business mean to you, Jess?
I have to say heart-centered. I do. I think a beautiful business is one that does what it's doing because it wants to help people. So I think a beautiful business isn't just a cold-hearted moneymaker. I think a beautiful business has soul and heart as well, and knows what it wants to do, knows that it has a really not just a direct impact potentially to the client or the end user, but also beyond that.
To finish our final question, what then one piece of advice would you give to anyone out there building a beautiful business right now?
Take a moment to reflect on who you're working with, and maybe it's you as well, who is experiencing or showing signs of the super helper syndrome or compulsion to help. Make a list of those people, and I would put one-to-ones in your diary to have with them, to ask them how they are, to ask them questions, listen to the answer, give them an opportunity to talk to you, give them an opportunity to tell you how they're feeling, touch base, encourage them, do something to make them feel valued. If you don't know what that is, ask them, how can we make you feel valued here? How can we make you feel, perhaps if you want more recognition, we can do something to help you experience that, because you don't want to lose this person. It's much cheaper to implement this kind of empathy in business, compassion in organizations, than it is to lose that person, either through burnout and sick leave or because they go elsewhere because they don't feel valued. So I think it's a really cheap way, to be honest, to keep really good staff, really good colleagues who might not be feeling that they might not have enough confidence to feel like they can always deliver the targets, or that they fully understand the business or financial side of things, not necessarily always, but how can you help them if they want to? How can you put them in a position to say, well, we can coach you on that. That's easy to learn. The empathy is the hardest stuff to learn, the desire to help others, the wherewithal to want to include others and naturally, be able to read the room and make people feel valued. That's impossible to teach, Paul. But you can teach business, you can teach finance, you can teach marketing. So I would focus on those people first.
I love it. What lovely advice. And thank you for spending the time with us today, Jess. As I said before, absolutely fascinating. I'm sure this will be incredibly useful for many, many people listening.
It's been lovely to talk to you about it, Paul. I'm really glad. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Beautiful Business Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please remember to subscribe and leave us a review. For more advice and practical tips on what it's really like to build a beautiful business, visit our content hub at wowco.uk/hub. or check out the link in the show notes.